Warning. Watch out for the shadows. They move when you are not looking at them. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following awesome individuals. Greg Ross, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Yvonne Williams, and Michael Friske. Thank you so much for helping make this show possible.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I have with me Brennan Store.
Hello.
And super happy, super infra man.
Hello.
Yes. Or Saxon. Whichever one's easier. Is Saxon an acronym?
It is super action. I don't know what to use for X.
Yeah, neither do I.
Z-Cross. Onslaught. Negatron. I don't know.
Well, you started off good.
I did. I started off good. I was kind of disappointed I lost it halfway through.
The X is a hard one.
It is.
I'd like to point out that he's also the most responsible person on this call because we've been talking for an hour and a half. And it just now, Saxon said, hey, maybe we should record the show.
Well, I did say that after a half an hour, and then we kept talking.
We did keep going, so.
Anyway, tonight we're dealing with the subject of shadow people, because I don't think I've ever done a show just on shadow people. Shadow people and, related phenomena. I'm not kidding. My brain not wording that one out there.
Yeah.
So similar things that are connected with shadow people type of encounters. Now, to me, shadow people are basically dark forms that are darker than dark. They almost seem like absence of light. And if you look at one of the things I looked up is like the skeptical explanation. And the skeptical explanation tends to be, well, people don't see things very well. It's usually out of the corner of the eye and low light. It's pareidolia. It's sleep paralysis. And a lot of those things are accurate. Like that they're not, there is a good case for a lot of the debunking of this stuff. But personally, I've had encounters that don't fit any of those descriptions.
Right.
Oh, sure. Yeah, me too.
So it's like, okay. And I was using Perplexity. And I was challenging it. I'm like, okay, debunk shadow people. And it gave me all the stuff I already found. And then it said, do you want to debunk a particular experience? And so I started putting in more and more information to the point where it just started sounding like your typical skeptic. And it's just going, oh, no, it's a trick of your eye. And I'm like, well, me and someone else also saw it in clear light, and it's like, oh, well, it was a trick of both your eyes, maybe a floater. Superimposed on the environment. I'm like, a floater is we both saw. As far as a floater in the eye.
Yeah.
So we will get to some of the skeptical explanations, but that's the basic tenor of it.
And I've definitely done that. Like I watched this horror movie the other night called Dream Eater, and I turned it on, and it's fine, but the opening is really strong. And so I'm sitting here in the dark on my couch. I got the blanket pulled up, and I'm start getting kind of spooked. And then I look to the corner of my room, and of course, I record the podcast in my living room. So I've got this black cloth in the corner to try and cut down on bounce. And so I see this black shape with kind of a silver markings on it, and I start losing my mind. And of course, I realize, no, you jackass, it's your mic stand and it's the black thing in the corner. You're fine,
Oh yeah, pareidolia is definitely a thing.
Pareidolia is a thing.
And I've been with people who will just see shadow people constantly, but it's always like, oh, it's completely dark, but I just saw a shadow. It's like, no, I don't think you saw a shadow. I think it's your eyes messing with you because it's too dark.
Yeah, they're trying to put something together to see something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've been walking down the road here before and been like, what is right in front of me? Like, because it was really, really dark and I didn't have the flashlight on. And then I'll turn the flashlight on and be like, oh, there's just nothing. It's just my eyes trying to make shapes out of darkness. But my shadow people encounters, the ones I actually count, are not that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, I've had, however many, probably 3 or 4 shadow people encounters over the course of my life. And no, they were most definitely not that. I've had ones that were maybe that. There was one time I was driving through a half-finished housing development at night, and I thought I saw a cluster of shadows at the end of this cul-de-sac, which was completely empty, but it was far away. It was night. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But the ones that were up close, those, brother, there's no mistake in that.
Yeah. And like with some of the experiences I've had with them, like I had 2 periods of my life that there were a fair amount of shadow people encounters, experiences, however you want to classify that. But the house that I lived in with my parents, the house I lived in when I was a baby, basically lived there till I was about 6 years old. A lot of strange things happened in that house, and might go into that further into the show. But it would be the middle of the day, and at the end of the hallway, you would see the shadow person standing there,
Right?
And then it would dart, out of the hallway into one of the rooms or something like that. But there's sunlight coming in. It's not dark. It's not the corner of your eye catching it. There's a moment where you see it like pause for a second and realizes that you can see it, and then it would sort of flit out of the room. And that one recurred a lot. But what I always thought was interesting about it, and Barbara kind of knew it instantly, was it was black, but it was like if you've ever taken a piece of art charcoal that you draw with and put the long side of it, the flat side of it, down on the paper and spread it across. So there's lots of the paper showing through breaks where the chalk or the charcoal is not reaching the paper from the yeah. And so it was like that. It was like a silhouette drawn out of chalk or black charcoal. And so you could see through parts of it. Like it was incredibly black, but sketchy at the same time.
So not,
but that was really freaking weird.
So not,
that you say it flitted out of the room, because I obviously we're going to talk about it later, but I found a couple examples, one online and then one in this book that, again, we'll talk about here in a bit, but they actually did the same thing. They flitted out of the room, and someone was able to kind of track them visually long enough to see them like disappear into closets and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah. And, and if you think about it, like the rooms or wherever they would go, this one, I say I think there was just one in that house. It would go into a room at the end of the hallway or something like that. Or to your point, like there's a linen closet back there and stuff. And of course, it just goes in there and there's nowhere to go after that. It's just gone.
Right.
If you were to chase it down the hallway or chase down and try to look in the hole into the room as quickly as you could, it's just not there. So the whole flitting out of the room is kind of interesting in and of itself, because it looks like it's going somewhere, but it's not there when you get there.
Well, it's going somewhere. You just can't see where.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Why don't you get into some of your other experiences, Saxon?
Yeah. So let me give you some context on that first one, because I think it's a fascinating kind of period of my life. And for my mom too, because that house was a strange place. We would hear voices in that house a lot. And on the show, I've told the story before about hearing the harmonica coming from the kitchen all night long.
Yeah.
That was in that same house. And one night, someone, that's in air quotes for those that are listening, seems like it was probably the shadow person, like sort of ripped my mom's wedding band off of her hand while she was asleep.
Oh.
And it woke her up as it was like flying across the room. So there were things like that happening. And my brother lived part-time with my biological father, and we had bunk beds. And we both had experiences where we woke up in the bunk bed and the shadow person's just standing there. And, you have that moment where you see him and you're kind of like aren't worried yet because you're groggy or it's the effect of the experience or whatever. And you sort of look away, and then you look back because you're like, oh my gosh, why is this dark, silhouette standing over the bed? And it's gone. And you could probably try to attribute that to like, what's the humanoid shape during, like sleep paralysis. But the fact that it happened to so many of us, and, my mom saw the same thing at the end of the hallway too. And the only person that didn't see it was my dad. And he never had a paranormal experience in his life, though.
That's really interesting.
That he admits to.
That he admitted to. But that felt like a very classic Shadow Man experience.
Yeah.
And I can jump ahead further in my life if you want to, or we can come back around to that.
No, you might as well keep going.
Okay. So when I was in my early to mid 20s, I lived in this duplex near where I was going to college. And that place, I had a shadow person that showed up in there all the time, especially when I was like depressed and anxious. And I really think that I attracted that thing. And sometimes there would be more than one. And it would show up more in like that hypnagogic state where you're kind of awake and kind of asleep. But it felt very real. It didn't feel like a dream. And I would feel incredibly frightened by them. And that was what really got me to first start looking up, like, what is this that's going on? What are these things? And, this is still the early 2000s, so the internet's not quite like what it is now. So, you'd find like a GeoCities page that's like the Hat Man or something that. You guys have heard me talk about the old MSN chat rooms and the, psychic group around there that I got to be just
moderator.
I got to be in that community. And those were the folks that first educated me on like, well, if it's like kind of the classic Shadow Man, it's there to feed off of your anxiety. And you have to figure out how to, it can't hurt you if you're not afraid of it. And I would essentially, instead of being calm, I would just get angry and started just imagining them setting on fire. and honest to God, that worked. They really didn't like that. And if I kind of aimed that at them with my, vision or whatever you want to call it, intention, they would catch on fire and then they wouldn't show up again for a couple months. But it was strange. And like I say, that's more hypnagogic, I suppose, as opposed to just like walking around during the day and they're there. But there was something to it because they went away when I, addressed them like that.
Right.
And I have one adjacent one in there that I've talked about briefly on the show before too. One of the martial arts I do comes from Indonesia, and a lot of the Southeast Asian martial arts still have cultures of, magic and things like that around them. And I think this was something attached to one of these lineages of Silat, and it was not malignant, but it would show up when I was, kind of reaching interesting points in learning and skill progression. And it would come in and try to wrestle me in the middle of the night. With like Silat techniques. And it was not mean, and it wasn't trying to like hurt me. And mind you, like if anybody thinks that I was experiencing a really awful sexual assault experience and covering for it or something mentally, like I lived alone.
I was sort of imagining more of a Inspector Clouseau and Kato situation.
Right. Yeah. Where it just ambushes him and things.
Yeah. Some guy he randomly kicks your ass to keep you sharp.
Yeah. In the middle of the night, this thing would show up and, it would wrestle me. And then, if I did the right stuff, it would go away. And it was just the strangest, wasn't frightening, wasn't scary, it did leave me tired sometimes, just because I needed to sleep. But that's probably the strangest one. And I really think there's something with the Silat, because a lot of the people that I learned and my teacher learned Silat from, they had gold needles inserted in their meridian points all throughout their body. And they knew when they were going to die. And, that they would tell you like, hey, I'm going to be gone next year. Like, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to be gone. I'm going to die next year. And they were right. And so I kind of feel like that was something that, I don't know if it was one of the other teachers from back in the day or just something that was attached to it or what, but I think that's a thing. And I know that's more adjacent, or analogous, but it was definitely a black silhouette.
Huh. See, mine have always been darker, like almost like I would call them liquid darkness.
Right, like they absorb the light. They're darker than dark.
Right, but also the borders seemed liquid, like fluid.
Yeah.
Yours sounded more like sketched out shadows from when you described it with the charcoal.
Yeah. And I should clarify, too, that was only the one when I was a kid that was sketched.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the other ones were pretty straightforward, like silhouettes. The ones that would feed on my anxiety were ink black silhouettes, but they were the slightest bit fuzzy at their edges. Like their rendering was a little poor or something like that.
I mean, I've had out-of-body shadow experiences. Brennan has now read all of the first part of the autobiography, so he knows some of this stuff now.
I do indeed. But I'm always interested to hear it from the source. It's always different when you hear it from the person. And
I think most of the big shadow and type encounters came from that time period. I think most of those are in that book, which will not be out this year, but hopefully beginning of next year. I kind of wonder for you if that's because that was such a formative time for you. Maybe.
There were so many things in flux in your life, and kind of things where parts of your personality were kind of solidifying, and you were kind of becoming the person you are. So I wonder if there's something to that.
Certainly possible, and it's also possible that more have happened that I just didn't even bother to record because they weren't really major, like, oh no, that was something. It was kind of like, was that something? Whatever.
Right.
And I may not have recorded stuff because it may have been one of those time periods where I wasn't recording stuff. I don't remember the last time I saw a shadow person, but as I was talking with John Michael a couple of shows ago, there was the incident where my friend and I were arguing outside of her garage, and it was a perfectly lit environment. And these little shadows, like animals, flit between us. And it stopped the argument. This was not someone I ever argued with either. That was the thing. This was a very unusual thing for us to be arguing. And we both saw them. I would see these things running across the road as I drove. I don't see them anymore. It was usually in the spring. So I just kind of dubbed them nature spirits. Like, nature's waking up. Nature spirits, But like we're sitting there arguing. I forget exactly when it was, but it wasn't like cold out or anything. And the whole driveway's lit up. It's not like this is a dark or dingy looking area. It's brightly lit up, and these multiple shadows just dart between us. And they go around her garage and around the back. And she's in the middle of saying something, and she just trails off. And then she goes, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What did you see?" And then she describes it, and I'm like, "Yep, I saw that." She goes, "What?" I'm like, "No idea." And then the argument was done.
Huh.
So the two immediate things you can take from that is it that energy of the argument created those things. An argument, negative. These are if you want to go with the shadows being a bad thing, or is it that the argument needed to stop? And the easiest way to stop an argument like that is to make a presentation that's weird.
Or it could be that, my experience of shadow people was that they kind of, my experiences with them were strongly negative. And in one case, it was almost like it hung off me until I could provoke an argument with my wife. And then we had this big and I'm not normally an argumentative person, but we got into an argument, and then we had this big blow up, and all of a sudden this weight that had been on me for 2 weeks since the shadow had touched me, it was gone.
Okay, wow. Tell that story more fully, I guess.
Sure, yeah. So essentially, when I first started writing my book, A Strange Little Place, which you fine folks can get on Amazon in both paperback and audiobook, I didn't really believe in the paranormal. It was just something to do. But after my first research trip, I was back in the office. Because I used to be the office manager for a consulting company. And I was telling the receptionist about all the spooky stories I'd heard on this research trip. And she was telling me about, spooky stories from where she was from. And then out of the corner of my eye, in one of the empty offices, because it was just us in the office that day, I saw this all black head peek out from behind a coat rack, hold there for just a second or two, just long enough for me to be sure what I was looking at. And then it kind of pulled back behind the coat rack. And I nearly lost my mind. I had no frame of reference for this. I distinctly remember the color starting to drain out of the day. It was bonkers. And so I really had to kind of force it down and pretend, like, not react, keep talking to the receptionist. And then about 2 weeks later, I was laying in bed at home. It was the morning. And, I always joke my wife works grown-up hours. I've always managed to kind of Peter Pan my way around the schedule. So I got to go to work later than she did. So when I woke up, it was, I don't know, say 8 or 8:30, one of the two. And it was May, light was coming through the blinds, and I rolled over to look at the clock on her side of the bed. Again, got the time, whatever it was, rolled back over on my back, and I realized that it was like there was someone standing to my left. But the problem with that is there's a bedside table there. So like there could not be someone actually standing where they were standing. So I turned to look, and when I did, I saw a shadow in the shape of a man standing next to me. And before I didn't know what shadow people were. I didn't have the language yet. But before I could react, this thing fell across me in the bed. And when it touched me, I felt electricity all throughout my body. And I passed out. When I woke up half hour later, it was gone. But I had this weight on me. And I went through the deepest period of depression that I had gone through at that point since high school. I had been out of high school for 10 years at that point, and I still it was the worst I'd experienced all that time. And it was just, again, it was like literally something hanging around my neck.
Right.
And it persisted until we had that big blow up, and then all of a sudden it was gone.
Yeah, there's interesting parallels between that and what I was dealing with when I got to college in that duplex, because they were provoking a response from me, sort of in a very immediate way, but it felt like they were either attached to me or they were almost like flies circling me or something like that. And just, almost like vampiric, feeding off of me, for lack of a better word. And so, yeah, all of that sounds really similar, Brennan. And just to go back, that one from my childhood that we saw a lot, there was a lot going around then in my life, my mom's life. She had gotten divorced from my biological father, almost by about the time I was a year old, and married my stepdad, who was wonderful. But I'm 5 years old and don't quite know how to like rationalize all this, but I'm starting to get a clue a little bit that like this is weird. And, I think that there was a lot of, stress and frustrated energy around that probably fed into that too.
Well, Brennan, with yours, what do you make of it? What do you think it was? Like, was it negative to you?
Oh yeah. My experiences with shadow people have all been negative. Like, well, okay.
But why do you feel that was negative? Because it stopped when you had the argument, so it's like it dispelled it.
But no, it was like the argument dispelled it.
Okay.
Because it's like it got what it wanted. That's what it felt like. Around. Yeah, because I felt more argumentative with that on me. I felt like angrier and more sad when it was there. And like my very first encounter, because I didn't necessarily realize this at the time, but when I was writing Strange, I realized this. I had a shadow person encounter when I was probably 8 or 9. And it wasn't people, it was bats, shadow bats.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. And that I made the connection later. I changed quite a bit from grade 3 to 4, I want to say, 4 to 5, I think it was. My personality changed quite a bit. I became much more depressed and introverted. And like, I'd always been kind of an introverted kid, but I was like much quieter after this. And I think that change coincided with the appearance of the bats. And basically that story, which I'll tell you about quickly here, is when I was younger, it was actually after my own parents' divorce. My grandmother would babysit us, my mom's mom. And she loved the tabloids, the Star and the Inquirer. Kids, ask your grandparents. And I would read them when she was done with them, So I knew from a young age about, the struggles of Lonnie Anderson and Burt Reynolds' marriage and other, again, names that will mean nothing to most of the young people listening to this. But one of the things I saw in there was this little feature that was draw energy from the earth. And it was like, because those things are pitched typically at homemakers, and it says, are you tired? Well, if you do this visualization exercise, you can pull energy from the earth and you can this will like revitalize you and you can go about your day.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that sounded like superhero stuff, and I was into superhero stuff, so I tried it. And again, it was a visualization exercise. I didn't have the language for that at the time, but that's what it was. And you would imagine, as I recall, it was like you lay in bed, but you imagine your feet are touching the ground, and you imagine drawing from the ground and kind of pulling the energy from the ground into you. And I'm sure whoever wrote this was just, he had a deadline to fill, or a deadline to meet. But I tried it, and of course, nothing happened, or so I thought. But when I went to bed that night, I distinctly remember laying in bed, and it was dark outside. My windows were open, but the screens were on. And as I was laying there in bed, I realized I was seeing, it looked like two bats flying above my bed. They were kind of flying around each other. And I remember I wanted to call out for my mom because I thought bats had gotten into my room somehow. I'd never seen bats in real life, but I assumed that's what they were. But for whatever reason, I didn't call out. And then before I could do anything else, these things stopped flying around and they flew directly down towards me and into my chest.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was the same sensation, I realized later. It was the same sensation as when the Shadow Man touched me, because I felt this electricity throughout my entire body. And I passed out. And like I said, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm reasonably sure that synced up with my personality change. And of course, some of you may who listen to a certain show, a certain very popular podcast, may recognize that story and think, oh, that sounds really similar to a story that's on my favorite podcast, the name of which I'm just going to say, it's called Spooked. And that is because the producer stole that story from me.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Back in 2019, they contacted me and they said, hey, I'm from this show. We'd like to have you on. Do you have any stories you could contribute? I told her that story. And she said, hey, well, can we can you maybe alter the story a little bit to really sort of hammer home how the bats kind of changed your mental health for the worse? And I said, well, the story is a story. I can't change it.
Yeah.
Can't change it, right.
She said, okay, well, I'll get back to you. Never heard from her again. And then I want to say a year later, one of my listeners said, hey, Brennan, there's someone on Spooked who has a story exactly like your bats. You should get in touch with this guy. And basically that's when I realized they hire actors.
Right.
They basically just took my story and they did exactly that. They tied it more closely to the mental health thing to hammer that plot point home. And then they put it out there as an original thing.
I've had people ask me for documentaries and stuff, could you tell this story but make it scarier? And I'm like, no, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I learned my lesson, we'll say. It was a long time ago now, so I'm not as salty about it as I was, but enough to mention it.
Well, what's interesting, you had the bats that did that. I had the shadow when I was standing out back of my barn. I'm watching it move across the ground, and it's just a circle of darkness, and I got the distinct impression it wants to come into me, and I went, yeah, sure, you're not real. And so it zipped to the bottom of my feet. I didn't have the electrical feeling you did. It just zipped to the bottom of my feet and disappeared. And then I felt like I noticed my moral compass sort of drifting. And at some point I'm like, why is my moral compass drifting? This wouldn't be okay with me. Why am I even considering this? And then I was like, oh my God, the shadow. Wait, was the shadow real? And I went back out the next night and I basically told it to get out, and I watched it zip out of my feet across the yard. And I went, am I imagining this again, or did I just witness something that's weird?
Yeah.
And again, Brennan probably remembers more about this than I do because he just read the book.
Yeah. Well, the thing I think is interesting is the fact that because you felt like your moral compass had changed. And I think that's compelling because, again, my experiences were negative.
Right.
But not everyone's are.
Well,
And
I mean, if it had changed my moral compass, I'm sorry. If it had changed my moral compass, I would have totally thought that was a negative thing. It's the fact that it strengthened it rather than, it could have gone either way. But
right.
Continue.
Well, I guess that's in a way, that's kind of what I mean. It's, how can I put this? You're dealing with something that can have a variable agenda, and that their agenda may not be recognizable to us. An intelligence that maybe wants things that its aims are impossible for us to reconcile because it's a non-human consciousness,
Right.
And like I said, the ones with the argument, that it stopped the argument. And it didn't seem like it wanted an argument necessarily. Everything felt different. She felt weird after that happened. Like if I remember right, I think she said she felt like she was in an altered state of consciousness, which is, again, not necessarily. I didn't see any of that as negative. I never felt negativity from that stuff. When I was a kid, I would have dreams of this big shadowy thing chasing me.
Oh, interesting.
And I couldn't get away from it. And at some point, I realized that was me. Like, that was the real me that I was not embracing because I was trying to be who my parents wanted me to be.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that was one of the things when I had the Kundalini awakening that was presented to me point blank. And I went, oh. And I suspect it might have caused my diabetes because diabetes, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune system where your body destroys the islet cells on your pancreas that creates insulin. And so here I am fighting myself. And right around the time that the Kundalini started and I developed diabetes is right at the peak of all that.
Huh. Oh, that's fascinating.
Now, I wish knowing that would make the diabetes go away. That would be great.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I always made that connection that, I was fighting myself for years. And once I stopped fighting myself, I stopped having those dreams. But then I had the encounter with the big shadowy form when I was pulled out of body, shortly before being given the name Seriah, which was almost like an initiation thing where it was just beating the crap out of me. But that's not a waking shadow person, like those are dream states, or out of body states. The one in the graveyard, in Ithaca when we were playing hide and seek. And it's funny because when Brennan was editing the book, I said, and suddenly we played a sudden game of hide and seek, and he X'd out the sudden. I went, oh no, that needs to be there. It was literally not planned. Like my two friends who were more familiar with this dark graveyard ran away and yelled, come find us. And me and my friend were like, okay. And then I thought I saw him walking because I was looking at a very distinct form with light behind it. So it was being lit up. And I was like, oh, there he is. And I'm like kind of, whispering to him, trying to get his attention. And I'm getting closer and I'm getting closer. And then I hear him yell because he found them. But he's way off in the other direction. And I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? And I watched the thing just disintegrate in front of me.
Oh.
So that wasn't a corner of the eye thing. That wasn't a trick of the light. This was something that was literally walking down, and I didn't know the area. So when I went back, it's a creek right there that runs through the graveyard. There's no one who could have been walking through there. And there's nowhere that like a shadow could have fallen to create that effect.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, this was impossible. Okay, And again, it didn't feel negative. If anything, it just felt like my friend,
Mm-hmm.
Who did turn out to be not such a good friend after a while. So maybe that was its foreshadowing.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Huh.
I mean, it's kind of fascinating to me how much of our dreams become easier to decode, or pardon me, how much easier our dreams become to decode once we understand that in many cases, everything in the dream is us.
Is it though?
I think in not everything, because obviously, I've had precognitive dreams, and I've had dreams where I'm contacting other people who are most definitely there.
Right.
But I do think like in like what you're describing, the one where you're running from.
Oh yeah.
Like it makes it so much easier to sort of understand what it's trying to tell us.
Right. Yeah.
Like I've had a lot of. I used to have these dreams where this terrifying, similar to you, Seriah, this terrifying black monstrosity, this huge thing that screamed and like shook with rage, and it was huge. It would burst out of doors and chase me, and I came to realize like that's me. That was before I made the changes in my life I needed to make. That was this part of me that wanted out. It needed something else. It was furious, and I'm not angry anymore, so I don't have those dreams.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did a little bit of. Also, I had the black shadow on the ceiling when I woke up. That was
I
the other thing
remember
your bat one reminded me of.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was moving along the tiles. And I laid there in bed like I had been asleep, and I woke up and I was wide awake watching it for a while. And I'm just like, that is fascinating. Okay. And then I just went back to sleep.
Like you do. You're like, well, it's there. Okay.
Yeah, it's just like another thing that happens. All right. But it wasn't like the thing about like pareidolia and stuff, or not pareidolia, but hypnagogia and hypnopompia is that they don't last super long usually.
Yeah.
They last for a few seconds to maybe a minute. This was many minutes of watching this thing, very clear-headed and just going, okay, I don't know what you are, but you don't feel malevolent. I guess I'm going back to sleep.
Yeah.
I looked up the history of everything I Googled. I Googled it. I put it in Perplexity and I even put it in Grok, and it all gave me the same info. And I'm like, okay, I don't have time to deep dive this, so I guess I'm just going to go with the info they gave me. But I was looking for the earliest shadow person reports. And it says the earliest recorded shadow person encounters are believed to date back to around 1153 BC, as described by indigenous peoples who reported seeing dark humanoid shadow figures. These figures were often described as vague, fleeting shadows, sometimes wearing hats or coats, and occasionally having glowing red or yellow eyes. These early reports indicate a widespread and cross-cultural presence of shadow people lore that spans centuries and continents. Like most of this stuff, anyway. Historically, shadow people have been associated with various folklores and supernatural beliefs, sometimes linked to demonic entities or spiritual beings like the jinn from the Middle Eastern traditions. Many accounts describe shadow people as tall, faceless silhouettes that appear mostly in peripheral vision and vanish when directly looked at, which is not my experience, and obviously not you guys' experience.
Right.
The Hat Man variant, a shadow figure wearing a fedora or a wide-brimmed hat, is among the most commonly reported types and has a notable presence in more recent paranormal lore. While the popularization of the term shadow people gained momentum in the late 20th century, the phenomena itself is rooted in much older historical and cultural records, including indigenous reports and ancient folklore. The consistent descriptions, it says, the earliest documented sightings date back over 3,000 years.
Oh, okay.
And it says the earliest documented Hat Man sightings trace back to the early 1950s, specifically notable with Albert Bender's encounters in 1952 that helped popularize the concept of the Men in Black. But I believe he had like three shadow beings that he encountered?
Something like that. It's interesting because I know about, I've read Al Bender stuff, talking about the Man in Black in his room that turned into smoke and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And disappeared with red eyes. And I never made the connection between that and the Hat Man before. But that's interesting that shadow people or the Hat Man and Men in Black have a connection somewhere back there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at Mike Ricksecker's A Walk in the Shadows, which I'll be sourcing some stuff from later. But he says here, in 1962, Bender reemerged with Flying Saucers and the Three Men, in which he told the full story of his encounter with the Men in Black. Late one night, he entered into his bedroom when suddenly three dark, shadowy, hat-wearing beings with glowing eyes materialized through his wall. Using a form of thought transference, these beings communicated that they wanted Bender to stop his UFO research, which he did. And this is a part I think is interesting because I have heard that Bender's credibility is, debatable.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting. He says, accompanied with an aroma of sulfur.
Yeah.
These entities frightened Bender so much he was unable to eat for 3 days. And now I would write that off as like, ooh, spooky Satan stuff. But when I stayed at, what's that place? The Murder House.
Which one?
Lizzie Borden House. Lizzie Borden House.
There we go.
Yeah. When I stayed at Lizzie Borden House, the whole place smelled like sulfur to me, but no one else could smell it.
Huh.
Oh.
I thought there was a gas leak.
Right.
Well, Joshua Cutchin's book on smells says sulfur is the most common smell in all paranormal encounter, across the board.
There you go. And another time, when I was in Victoria on the West Coast there used to be a coffee shop. There's a building, they turned it from, used to be the Hudson's Bay. and they renovated it into condos with retail space on the bottom, but they could never get the retail space never really took off. And there used to be this fancy coffee shop there that I would meet a friend of mine for coffee at every now and again. And we were both there one day, and I said, "Jesus, do you smell that?" He goes, "Yeah, I think there's a gas leak." And then he stopped and he went, "Nope." He said, "It's this place." He said, "No one." He said, "I'll go and ask," but he said, "I think we're just catching on to something that no one else is picking up because there's something wrong with this building." And sure enough, no one else in the place smelled it, but we were both you could not smell it.
Wow.
Why did he think it was just something you guys were picking up?
Because he turned out to be a guy who's actually pretty energetically sensitive. He had just kind of it took a long time for him to open up about it. And then he went and asked, because he told the barista, he said, "Hey, just so you guys know, we're both kind of smelling it's like maybe gas, like a gas leak." And no one else in the place smelled it at all.
Fascinating.
It's like one night I used to work out at this 24-hour gym, and one night me and this other guy were the only people there, but we could smell smoke, and we could see these thin runners of smoke coming out of the wall, but no one else could see them.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if the place was on fire. Certainly I never heard anything about it, and I went back there and everything was fine. But me and this dude, this big swole dude, we were kind of looking at each other. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and we're thinking, is it? You smell it too, right? But the handful of other guys and drug dealers who were, it's mostly cab drivers and drug dealers at that time of night, no one was reacting to it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that could have just been, idiots not paying attention. But the sulfur thing, that, again, the bender thing, that stands out to me because I've experienced that several times.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things I pulled up here was historically some indigenous cultures like the Choctaw had beliefs akin to shadow people with concepts such as an outside shadow that could wander separately from the body and frighten people after death. These cultural interpretations viewed them as omens or spiritual forces, sometimes malevolent or trickster-like. There was more on that, but it's not in this section. But they were saying you have an inside shadow and an outside shadow.
Huh.
Which I've never heard before.
I like that. Or go ahead, Brandon. You're about to say something.
No, I was actually on mute.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, because it feels like sort of a personification a bit, or a more natural way of talking about like a shadow side and a higher self sort of.
Oh, okay. I found it.
Okay.
Choctaw legend features Nalusa Chito, a great black soul-eating shadow being that creeps into minds harboring evil thoughts or deep sadness to devour souls. Each person has an outside shadow, a Shilamapish, that wanders separately from the body, and an inside shadow, a Shilap, with the roaming shadow capable of frightening people after death, resembling modern shadow people descriptions.
Interesting.
Wow.
Inuit folklore describe Tariksuk, known as shadow people, as invisible humanoid entities from a parallel dimension who leave only fleeting shadows as traces of their presence. They mirror human society but vanish upon direct confrontation, revealing human caribou hybrid forms only in death.
Ooh, interesting.
Oh,
that's cool. Just jumping in here on that, the ones that I dealt with in the duplex, and then the other one that was around when I was a little boy, the malignant ones, kind of felt like they were running on instinct a little bit or something like that.
Like animals?
Kind of, yeah. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't consider them like, as complicatedly sentient as a person, but, just sort of trapped in what they are in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but, more like a force with some characteristics than just a straight up, like, totally self-aware kind of thing, but something a little bit more instinctual, and emotionally driven, maybe. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. There was also, the term shadow people was popularized by paranormal researcher Heidi Hollis, who wrote a book on the topic. It doesn't say what the book's called. and pop culture, such as the 1985 Twilight Zone episode, The Shadow Man, has added to the modern mythology of shadow people. The Japanese folklore, Kaj Ono, or Shadow Woman, is a ghostly entity that appears as a woman's shadow on a wall or screen, even when no physical person is present.
That's really cool. That makes me think of like shadow plays and things like that too, with the different puppets. But, it's makes sense that there would be so many shadow, myth kind of cultural ideas out there, because a shadow is such a powerful image anyway.
Right.
But it also just to me is like, well, yeah, shadow people are real.
That's it. We're all kind of just describing the same thing in different ways. We're all seeing these things. We're all just trying to come up with our best possible explanation of it.
But there is something to the debunking aspect of it, right? Because, so I like I said, I had perplexity kind of. Is this perplexity? This might have been Google. I asked it to debunk shadow people, and it says shadow people experiences are best explained by normal brain and body processes, not external entities or demons. This is definitely perplexity, actually. Reports of shadow people usually describe a dark, vaguely human shape seen in low light, often at night, sometimes accompanied by intense fear or sense of presence. These experiences cluster around sleep, stress, and ambiguous visual environments, all of which are known to distort perception. So that's not untrue. There are a lot of shadow people stories, again, corner of the eye, which perceives things differently, low light conditions, maybe partially awake. It talks about neuroscience and sleep paralysis. A huge chunk of classic shadow person encounters line up almost perfectly with sleep paralysis. You wake up unable to move, feel a weight on your chest, and sense a hostile figure nearby or on top of you. Hallucinated intruders, looming shapes or beings at the bedside are textbook features of sleep paralysis episodes. During sleep paralysis, parts of the brain that generate dream imagery, are still active while the body is temporarily paralyzed and the person is partly awake.
I can see all that. I think one of the problems is like this is how you kind of like the skeptics kind of box the argument in, because they kind of frame it all within the boundaries of sleep paralysis. When you try to get them to explain.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember stories on Coast to Coast once. Someone called in and said they saw like a black arm come out from behind a corner when they were playing as kids, and the arm like waved at the air, and as it did, it made a sizzling sound. And that's not explicable by your brain kind of switching in between modes, but we keep kind of having the same conversation around like, well, it's sleep paralysis.
Yeah, and
right. And I was kind of thinking of it along those same lines, Brennan, because it's sort of you get into a chicken and the egg thing where it's like, does the sleep paralysis attract the shadow people? Or is it a byproduct of sleep paralysis, or does the sleep paralysis make it easier for you to, have that, be in that hypnagogic state where you can perceive better?
I think it's both and. I don't think it's one thing.
I think so too.
Louis Proud, who wrote, I had on for the, which book was it? It was the people burning up.
The spontaneous combustion.
Yeah, that's it. Spontaneous human combustion. Before he retired from talking about this stuff. His first book was on sleep paralysis. And when he wrote the first book, I think he was like 50-50 on whether or not it was paranormal and how much of it was just, regular sleep paralysis. And I think when I had him on, he said, I'd say now 20 to 30% of it's paranormal. He's like, the more I've looked at it. But he never got rid of the paranormal. It was always there. It was always like, no, there's something weird to some of these cases.
Right.
But, yes, some of the sleep paralysis is just what scientists say it is. It says anxiety, trauma, and high stress increase hypervigilance and feelings of presence, making it more likely that the brain will generate a sensed other in the room, which then gets visualized as a shadow.
Right.
So
I always wonder though, why it's just a shadow? If you're visualizing anything, why not, a tiger with a knife on its arm?
Right. So no, I've wondered that too, because you'll hear people say that when they've had abduction experiences and the skeptics try to wave it away, they'd be like, well, it was a hypnagogic experience. And you're like, well, that always goes back to that kind of shadowy gray figure. And I'm not saying gray like a gray alien, but just, it's just a nondescript figure. And I'm like, but, some of these people are having detailed experiences, and just saying, well, they were seeing, hypnagogic figures is like really reductive, kind of insulting. And to your point, like, my mind comes up with some crazy stuff when I dream.
Sure.
And I got to tell you, if I was going to scare myself in bed, I would come up with something way cooler than a black silhouette.
Right.
Yeah, exactly this.
So I'm looking for the earliest modern accounts of shadow people. And it says the modern accounts emerged in the late 20th century and gained widespread attention around 2001. It says the term and concept were popularized, words not working, through the Coast to Coast AM radio show, with the first in-depth discussion on April 12, 2001, when host Art Bell interviewed Thunderstrike's Harley Swiftier Reagan, prompting listeners to submit hundreds of sketches of shadow figures. Later that year, in October 2001, author Heidi Hollis published her first book on shadow people, describing them as flickering dark silhouettes that could choke people during sleep paralysis-like encounters, further spreading reports via her radio appearances. A precursor goes back to Albert Bender. So yeah, I mean, so the idea that her thing saying that they're they're choking people during sleep paralysis could just be sleep paralysis.
Right.
And
when you get that too, it reminds me a bit of old hag experiences too, so there's a little bit of a crossover.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
So I'm actually looking at a transcript of Art Bell, and this is from I just want to see what date.
Oh, did we all go quiet?
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
You there?
Okay, there we are.
Right,
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm looking at a transcript from Art Bell from November 18th, 2006, and I just had it, so I had to scroll up to there we go. So this is a conversation about shadow people, and folks, if you're not aware, there's it's called fight.fudgy.org, and it's called the Knowledge Fight Interactive Search, but they have a crazy amount of searchable Art Bell transcripts. It is awesome. An incredible resource. And
is it fight.fudgy.org?
Yeah, F-U-D-G-I-E.
G-I-E, okay. I was like, I was trying to figure out how to put it in.
Yeah, so this person says, someone named Liz, and they said, my mom had a very severe stroke when I was 15, and she was reading in the National Enquirer an ad for this book written by a husband and wife team. They called themselves witches. She got this book and was reading it to my Nana, and I could hear her reading it out loud from my bedroom. I was just laying on my stomach reading a book, and while she was reading this, I could hear this blather. I just kind of saw something out of the corner of my eye in the hallway. It was a shadow of a man, just a dark shadow of a man with a fedora hat. And he looked like the silhouette of the Exorcist looking up at the window in the poster of that movie. And I said, my God, what is that thing? I got off the bed. I didn't know what it was. And the shadow literally just ran down the wall and ducked into the tiny little alcove in the bathroom. And then it was gone.
Huh.
So that really puts me in mind of your experience, Saxon.
Yeah, but also, like that sounds very familiar.
But also, weirdly, my own because of the National Enquirer angle.
Right. Oh, that is interesting. Huh.
Okay.
Do we have a year for that National Enquirer publication?
No. This person said it was when they were 15, but I don't think they gave a date.
Huh. That would be interesting to look that up, too, if that was around like the time my family and I lived in that house.
Well, we got to take a break. We will be right back. All right, time for some contact info and a recommendation. Contact info is simple. wheredidtheroadgo.com. From there, you can get to everything I do, actually, if you go to the link tree. And you can become a patron for only $3 a month and get extra content with every show. Plus, the show's a couple weeks early, commercial-free. Plus, extra stuff on top of that is Patreon only. And again, it's $3. It's always been $3. So, yeah, I have never raised the price on that. I want people to have the extra content. So, www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And if you want to send a personal story for our listener story show, it's stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. That's the email. All that stuff can be found on the page. as well as all the social media links. As for a recommendation, I'm going with a movie called Bugonia, Bugonia. It's really good. It's about a guy who believes that our leaders are like aliens, basically, and he kidnaps this woman. I believe she was a head of a corporation or something, and he's basically torturing her to get her to admit that she's an alien and allow him to contact her mothership. It's a dark story, and the end is a great. The end is just great. I'll just go with that. I really, really liked it. So that's my recommendation. Bugonia. Now back to the show. So I'm here with Brennan and some guy named Saxon, I think.
That's what they told me when I woke up in the hospital.
Okay, sure. All right.
Moby's Extreme Ways starts playing.
So Brennan, I don't think you got to all of your shadow person stories.
Yeah, I mean, sure. So, like, obviously, yeah, the bats were the first, and of course, the one I described in the office, and the office, would turn out to be a real locus for my shadow person experiences like that. Not just people, but darkness as a solid force,
right? As
a solid thing, became a regular feature of my experience in that office, particularly when it was on the second floor, because when I first took over in that company, we were occupying about 1,600 square feet on the second floor of this building in Bastion Square in Victoria. And Bastion Square is a notoriously haunted part of Victoria. Some people say it's because that's where public executions used to take place. Everyone kind of has their own theory. But this building was, very, very haunted. And I would go there at night. I think I've mentioned this before. I would go there at night because that's where my, my podcasting equipment was. And, and also at the time, I would just go there to hang out because it was just cool having an office I could go to. I had all the codes, people, I just kind of had run of the place. And I think I was watching a movie on my laptop one night, and I looked across the hallway and into my boss's office, and I noticed, it's the boss, it's dark, it's really dark. Like I can't even see into his office. So he must have his windows, his curtains closed. And I looked a few minutes later and I realized, nope, his curtains are wide open and the street light is on. There was something blocking my view. And that was not uncommon. That was, it was a very, very active place. I think I've mentioned before on here, it reached a point where if I tried to talk about it on the phone, there would be interference. And if I stepped outside, it would be fine. If I stepped back inside, there would be interference. And if I changed the topic, then the interference would stop. And there was a lot there. And then we moved up to the third floor and into a much smaller office. But I remember when we were recording Ghost Story Guys up there, I think that's actually where we started, was on the third floor. Ian and I were recording, and we both kind of said, there's something in the office. There were 3 rooms, and we both kind of thought, there's something just in the next room. And I tried to do sort of imagine a white light filling the office. It's sort of like a protection thing, I guess. And it was like something kept dodging.
Oh, interesting.
And I mean, later I would have a listener who would come to borrow some books, and she told me that actually the thing that's here, the thing that you keep trying to sage away, is actually is a buffer between you and some other pretty nasty stuff that's kind of moving in and out. But yeah, and like I think the most dramatic one I had in the office, in terms of like a shadow, not a person, but just a shadow, was one night I went in there. It was driving around with a buddy of mine. And I went in to use the bathroom, I think. And so we drove into the third floor of the neighboring parkade, which had a door that connected to the third floor of our building. So drove into the parkade, opened the door, and the hallway that led into the building was darker than it should have been. I mean, the lights were off, but it was still, even so, it was darker than it should have been. It was like, imagine if there was cobwebs, but there were no cobwebs.
Okay. Right.
If that makes sense, it felt like there were cobwebs, but there weren't.
Oh.
So we moved in and went into the hallway. And at this time, the office was still on the second floor. So we went into the little hallway and then stepped out into sort of the grand staircase. Now, the grand staircase was it was grand. And there was a big stained glass window across on the opposite side of it with a couple streetlights right through it. So there was always light. But as I stepped through the door into the grand staircase, I felt the hair go up on the back of my neck. And I looked down, and the bottom of the stairs where the second floor landing where the office door was pitch black. It was like darkness was pooled there. And I said, my friend and I looked at each other. We both went, nope, absolutely not. So we walked back out, and we were standing there with the door open. And we thought, we're being crazy. We're being crazy. So we went in again. We didn't even get as far this time before we both got the hackles went up. And so finally, we're standing outside in the parkade. The parkade's very bright, but the hallway is just pitch black. And we're holding the door open, kind of having that moment you have sometimes where you're thinking, is this really happening right now?
Right.
And then as we were having this moment, this warm wind pushed past us out the door, which, okay, maybe the heating kicked on, it's not impossible. But then that same warm wind pulled back in.
Oh, weird.
Like a breath. And as it did, it took the shadows with it. The shadows literally receded as we watched. Until, out down the hall and around the corner until it was just normal dark. But we both saw it. I'll never forget that. We looked at each other and just, again, kind of thought, did we actually see that? But we did. And that was, I think that was the end of my shadow encounters maybe that's not true. My memory is kind of hazy. It's a long time ago now. But once we moved up to the third floor, again, it got less heavy. But I think my most recent shadow people encounters, there was one, which I definitely know I've told on the show before when I was living in Montreal. Shortly after I moved there, a friend took me for a late night drive. I think it was through the town of Lachine, which I'm told, I've discovered, afterwards is legendarily haunted. And I woke up in my room from a bad dream later that night, and I was on the 28th floor of a apartment building that looked out over the city. So it was never totally dark, but I always left my blinds open because it was such a cool view. So when I woke up and I rolled over, the room was bright enough that it was very easy to see what looked like a figure in a hooded robe standing over top of me. And I remember gasping. And as I did that, it zooped back, kind of like in the house in Poltergeist. You know how it gets sucked back down?
Yeah,
like that into my closet. And then it was gone.
So interesting you say that. The one that we would see by the bed, when my brother saw it, it looked like it was in a hood.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It didn't look like that for me. It looked like the sketchy thing. But when my brother saw it, it was, like a hood and sort of just almost like a cape, I guess, just because it was that sort of, straight outline down to the floor.
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
Well, I mean, in Rick Secker's book, he actually specifically mentions the hooded figure as an iteration of Shadow People.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I know we did an episode of Ghost Story Guys, which is my podcast, and everyone should listen to it. On I can't remember what we called it, but it was about hooded figures. It was about ghost monks actually. And we pulled stories from Ruth Roper Wild's These Haunted Times series. But what was really interesting about that is, everyone in the UK kind of says, oh, there was monks, because we've got all these history of druids and various religious orders that have existed in England over the years. But if you read Rick Secker's book, the hooded figure shadow archetype is not limited to the UK, which kind of then suggests it's not a bunch of ghost monks running around, it's something else.
Interesting. I mean, because when I had that out-of-body experience where the thing beat the crap out of me, there was a bunch of hooded figures sitting around in a circle.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
Which I just referred to them as watchers. I was like, I don't know what they were just sitting there watching.
So, what are they, like in a ring around you?
Yeah. It was like I was a circle in a fight, except they were sitting on the ground and I couldn't see any features. They were just in robes and hoods.
How old were you then, Seriah?
Oh boy. Like 19 or 20?
Huh. Okay. You probably remember the story, Brennan. I've never told it around you, but that same duplex, I had been doing a lot of Qigong, and I was doing a lot of stuff you weren't supposed to do when you were doing it. And I got really sick, like you do. And, I woke up in a daze on the couch in the middle of the night, and there were 3 figures standing around me. and it was like they were annoyed to be there. Yeah, because they were basically like, you could tell they were like, well, we're going to fix this, but don't, do it again. Like we, and it was almost like they happened to be passing by and they circled and we're like, oh, fix this stupid kid before we get out of here, and they're like, all right, we're out. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was like a grumbling experience, like, you idiot kind of thing.
Out of curiosity,
yeah.
What were you doing that you weren't supposed to?
Yeah, well, that was exactly it. I was doing a lot of things that were, the Qigong practice considered unhealthy.
I see.
Yeah. And so I got myself sick and these things showed up. But, early 20s. And I kind of like took a lot of that experience of when I was in that duplex as, sort of like that second adult initiation process all happening that year. When I kind of got reacquainted with the paranormal and all of that. And so in my head, that time I spent in that house is sort of a year of transition and accepting this sort of stuff again. But anyway, that's why I was asking Seriah about the age too. I was like, there's a correlation there.
I probably would have been, man, I don't know, 19. I think 19.
Yeah, you're an overachiever.
I wasn't doing any martial arts.
Well, different stuff.
Well, I tell you, man, I, as someone who used to kind of scoff at stuff like Qigong, I went and had acupuncture done earlier this year.
Oh, yeah.
And quite literally life-changing.
Yeah. It's like everything. There are people that are incredible at it, and then there are people that are just, they don't know what they're doing, and they're making stuff up, and the stuff that they learned was made up. And I'm sure the same thing with Kundalini. It just depends. But like I've been around some folks that would also act like it's silly, but then would turn around and like, make your arm go limp from like across the room or something like that. Just weird stuff. Yeah, those kinds of things. And it's always very interesting to me how like some of those guys will be very make fun of like the goofy stuff, because they think it's fake and all that. And then the next second, they're floating their hands over somebody's leg and the foot's turning involuntarily while they're trying to clear out, some type of damage or a blood clot or something like that. I mean, it's just strange stuff.
Oh yeah. I screwed up my knee, and I went and like I thought, okay, she's just going to fix the knee, but it brought down my blood pressure. I feel less angry.
Yeah.
And this is almost a year later.
Wow.
And what's really interesting too is I started to get some more like kind of tightness back in my legs, and so I went and had a massage done. And basically, it's almost, she just kind of worked the same places as the acupuncturist.
Yeah.
And again, that has been just like crazy life-changing. Like I won't get into it because it's not really kind of relevant, but just fascinating kind of seeing both these people basically just working certain energetic spots.
Yeah.
It just huge difference. Like anyways, it's real stuff. If you get a good practitioner, man, it's worth checking out.
Absolutely.
There was a girl who now you bring up energy and shadow people. So she was, I've told this story before. I was helping her with her energy. She had been through atrocious abuse. And apparently I was the first person she was really telling a lot of it to. Oh. And so I was helping her with her Kundalini reluctantly, because like I was kind of like, I don't, she just seemed like she was going to be very difficult, but she opened up pretty easily. And we're walking through the graveyard one night, same graveyard I saw stuff, and I'm looking over in the direction where I saw the shadow person, and she just stops, and I turn and she's completely pale and looks like she's on the verge of panicking. And I grabbed a hold of her and I said, "Do not run. What did you see?" And she's like, "So right up there," because it was a moonlit night, you could see everything very clearly. She's like, a person just walked into the road, or it's a road, but it's not like a road. It's a cemetery road, It's paved, but it's also rough. You've been there before, Saxon.
I was going to say, I remember this, yeah.
And so she's like, A person just walked in, and I thought it was a person because it was exactly like a person, and then it disappeared. It just disintegrated. Yeah. And all she saw was a shadow, but she just figured with the light of the moon, it was a person walking, and people would walk through there. And I had to calm her down because, I mean, there's a lot of hidden, this graveyard is very old. There's a lot of hidden tombstones and things like that. And I'm like, do not run. You're going to end up hurt. So just stop.
Right.
But again, she also had massive issues with Kundalini.
Oh, wow.
As well as a lot of other things, but it was what it was. But I mean, I think there's connections there. And I wish I could remember if there was something specific going on right then that might have caused her to see that. But I don't even know if it's in my notes. Because it would be interesting to see if she had just had a breakthrough or had one right afterwards.
Right. But, yeah, it'd be something to like ask Chris about just with, he's so knowledgeable in energetic bodies and things like that too. I'm sure he would have some thought there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I'm just wondering the connection between shadow people and this stuff as well. I mean, I find that a lot of people who have active, uncontrolled Kundalini also tend to experience a lot of shadow people encounters.
That makes sense because I assume that you're just like, like a faucet on a sink that's been broken off the top.
Right. Right.
And you just got, energy pouring out that's, just kind of wild and no control or anything over it. And especially if you're like not feeling good, then it's going to have a certain seasoning to it or
draw in
flavor.
Darker things, maybe.
Yeah.
But again, we make that assumption that dark is evil.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case.
That's true.
I mean, it certainly can be, but anything can be. I mean, I guess I don't like the concept of good and evil so much as like harmful or harmless.
Right.
I've always used the analogy that, to us, a kitten is, oh, that's adorable. That's a lovely thing, but not to a mouse.
Yeah. It's a gigantic predator. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a singular thing. It's perspective. And people, there are pretty evil people out there, but most people do not think they're evil. Even if they're doing evil things, they've somehow justified it to themselves or been brainwashed enough that they think what they're doing is the good thing.
Right.
There's not a lot of true villains out there who are like, this is the bad thing to do, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the bad guy. It happens.
Yeah.
And I think when you're dealing with shadows, we just have that response of, oh, this is negative. It's dark.
Right.
And like I said, most of mine have not been negative. I mean, the one that beat me up even, I don't know what that was. If that was a part of my higher self, if that was a test of some sorts, but it didn't feel malicious. Definitely weird.
I mean, I think whether or not you characterize it as, like dark or threatening, I do think there's something to what Saxon's saying about the attraction to a source of energy.
Yes.
Oh, like I think, as you say, like if you've got unchecked energy just kind of geysering out of you, then I do think you are more visible.
Absolutely.
That's sort of one of my pet theories.
Right.
Like how some people are more likely to be, kind of, I hate to use the term because I just think it's overused, but some people are more likely to be kind of preyed upon by narcissists.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because they have a certain light to them. I've got a very dear friend who when we first became acquainted, I said, hey, you've got you're like a candle in a dark room. I hope you know that because I think people are going to try and take advantage of that, and they absolutely did.
Wow.
So I mean that's another thing that people with abuse. Who also tend to give off lots of Kundalini energy also tend to draw in narcissists.
Okay.
Huh. So, I mean, because if you're abused, you kind of let some of that stuff go, depending on what type of trauma you've been through.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And I'm trying to remember the name of the damn podcast that, okay, no, that's not it. It's an awesome podcast.
Ghost Story, guys. Great show.
That is a good one, yes. This is totally not what I was looking for. Damn it! It's
Fear Daily, another great show.
I'll let that one go. Yes, I agree. I know I've recommended it a number of times, and it's just escaping me right now. It's done, but basically the idea was that these women in this I think she used a line like a lineage, but I'm not sure. But they were visible to these things on a different level. So these beings, these ghosts, would come to them, but they weren't ghosts. This was the thing, and they would talk to these women and interact with just these women. And eventually, it comes out that the reason this is happening is because these women are like lights in the darkness.
Okay.
It's not Spines, but it's the same girl who did Spines. I am not. It's one of the first things I recommended. And when I'm looking up Spines, that's not an easy Google.
I was going to say that is general.
Because if I can find her name, I can figure out what the other show is, because it's absolutely worth a listen. It's incredibly good. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mirrors. It's called Mirrors.
Oh,
okay.
So yes. That's a terrible Kiefer Sutherland film.
I don't remember it.
That's for the best.
You are all about movies.
I watch an obscene amount of movies.
You're like, yes, that's because I watch a lot of them.
Man. I went to go see Wicked for Good last night. That was the 104th movie I've seen in theaters this year.
Wow.
Nice.
Mirrors is a sci-fi horror audio drama podcast. 3 women, 3 centuries, 1 haunting is how it's labeled.
Huh.
Okay.
Like I said, it is very well worth... Jamie Killen. Okay, I put in Killian. That's why I wasn't finding her. But yeah, it's a really good podcast. And it has some really interesting ideas, which are similar to what we're talking about now. I feel like I need to listen to it again because I don't remember all the details anymore.
Huh.
So I can enjoy it all anew.
I want to throw in, since I'm a giant movie nerd, as we've covered. I want to throw in a mention for the film Alien Code or The Men. It kind of goes by either name. It's on Prime, or at least it usually is on Prime. But it is a super, super low budget sci-fi horror film. But it also kind of traffics in some of the stuff we're talking about in terms of like unusual ideas.
Oh.
In ways that you don't normally see depicted on film. Again, it's very low budget, but it goes places you almost never see in movies.
Can you think of any good shadow people movies?
I mean, they do touch on shadow people there in that one.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I can't think, aside from The Nightmare, which is, obvious.
Which is almost, which is half documentary, half,
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, the parts that are shadow people are very effective.
Yeah. We just as an aside, Peter Pan, ends up in Wendy's room because his shadows become detached from him and he's trying to catch it.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
So just worth throwing that in there. It has its own mind, of course, too, which reminds me a little bit of the Choctaw legend from earlier.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Were you, was there any other things you noted in that book you were reading?
Yeah. So let me just have a peek here. There was, there was a specific story, and sort of going on to what we were talking about in terms of the negative influence. There's a story concerning someone named Taliesin. And basically they said, as the days went on after I saw the red-eyed thing, I was in a very, very depressed state. This red-eyed thing is the Shadow Man. All I felt was that I want to die. I want to hurt myself. I'm not worth the space I take up on Earth. And they said, these are thoughts I've never had in my entire life. And this entity had been seen first years beforehand by her brother Travis, who stated, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and was just frozen solid, could see my breath, and there was a dark entity with red eyes. And it seems like this this persisted. The thoughts, Taliesin goes on to say, the thoughts I was getting in my head weren't mine because I would never do these things. I would never want to hurt myself. I couldn't figure out why I was feeling that way when I've never felt that before. It was always the same thoughts and feelings. It was like you're being invaded. And according to her mother, there were times when Taliesin wouldn't be herself. She would get very hostile. She didn't sound like herself. She didn't look like herself. Her behavior had changed enough that I was afraid something was wrong. And now what's interesting is the phenomenon spread to the mother because there was an incident one night where the mother was being held down in bed by something unseen.
Mm.
Oh.
And this also reminds me, I should say as well, Rick Secker says the paranormal investigative team I was with at the time was called in to help determine what was going on. Our research uncovered a number of tragedies at the house. 2 suicides, 1 intentional, 1 accidental, and an attempted suicide during a violent domestic dispute that had gone terribly wrong. Oh, wow. Part of our investigation was determining whether the entity tormenting Taliesin was one of those who died on the property, in her bedroom no less, or something else that may have been at the heart of not just her despair, but also those previously in the home. And so he goes on to say, and folks, definitely check out this book. Obviously, we don't want to spoil everything. A Walk in the Shadows by Mike Ricksecker. It seems to be a really solid book.
By who again?
Mike Ricksecker.
Okay.
But so anyways, this house has a history of this stuff. And I had a friend of mine, a guy, a dear friend of mine, Anthony, once told me that he used to be a janitor. And Anthony is the most psychologically stable guy I know. He is, the dude is a rock. But there was one particular building over in Victoria in a part of town called the Rail Yards, which is the site of a bunch of these new buildings. He started telling his boss he would not clean over there because there was one particular building. He always had extraordinarily depressive, very powerful thoughts of self-harm. And it only ever happened in that building. He never saw shadows there. But I couldn't help but think about it reading this story. He would, like, literally to the point where he would just imagine how everyone in his life would be better off without him. He'd be looking at the scraper that they use to, get all the gunk off the windows, and then he'd look at his wrists. And he said, it was tempting. And he said, I am not a depressive person. I do not have depression. But in that building, something would affect me.
And I wonder if it could be like some kind of waves or something, electromagnetic or something that's just causing, affecting his mood.
Yeah, could very well be. But it was always in that one place.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I wonder if there was something there. I mean, that would be actually testable if we were there and had the equipment.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't pay me to go over there, but just because I think it's a bummer of a neighborhood in general.
And the red eye thing. I mean, I've never seen that. I've never seen a shadow person with red eyes, but that goes across into red-eyed monsters. I mean, that's one of the things Keel pointed out is that a lot of these weird cryptids and stuff all have red eyes.
Yeah, very true.
And you definitely seem to have a more negative outcome with the red-eyed things than with anything else for whatever reason. I mean, Bigfoot people will be like, oh, it's eye shine. It's like, nope, these are glowing red eyes that people encounter, not really eye shine.
I used to know this woman who would wake up at night, and she was a very spiritually aware person, but a very successful person, so she didn't like talking about this stuff very much. But she would wake up at night to find a ball of red light floating in the corner of her bedroom. And she never knew what to make of it. And she wasn't sure she thought because it was red, you'd think it would be negative. But then I remember finding some literature online that suggested that red can also be a protective thing.
Right. Yeah. But specifically the red-eyed, like monster sightings, shadow men, things like that, tend to fall more toward the negative. And maybe it's just a perception. Again, like I think when people encounter shadow people, they immediately think negative because they're shadows.
Right.
And
I will say, go ahead, Seriah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when I come across accounts online of shadow people and things like that, and in books, it usually does have the red eyes with it. And, just like you're saying, like that's not been a thing for me.
Yeah.
None of the stuff I've encountered have been like that. But that's, just an interesting note.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, it all goes into maybe we're seeing shadows because our brain can't conceive of what's there.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a place marker, doesn't have a card to be like, oh, this is this. And of course, as this stuff becomes more pop culture-ish, it becomes that placeholder for something that maybe otherwise would have been something else.
Mm-hmm. There's a passage in this book that I thought was interesting in regard to that. It's in a section on black mist, which is something I've also had some experience with. But the person being interviewed says, I think they're part of the environment. And I think that's how they maneuver, how they transport themselves. I think sometimes they appear in human form because they're matrixing their environment. They're drawing upon impressions of human beings because we're all over the place. And that would be something to emulate, the structure. But they do it in a distorted fashion. I think their natural form is formless, smoke and cloud-like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That would also explain the sort of nature spirit thing, because I'm seeing them at the time period where animals are coming out of hibernation, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it explains to a certain degree that same woman who would wake up at night to see the red light, she was the one who put me onto this deeply haunted house several blocks away from where my wife and I lived. And one night she was out walking her dog and she saw a large raccoon-esque shaped shadow, but much larger than any raccoon, walk up with no features, I might add.
Yeah.
Walk up to the gate to this house, stand up on its hind legs, push open the door, and walk through standing up. And so if you think like this, it's just kind of drawing on what's nearby. Well, that neighborhood, we have a lot of raccoons.
Right, yeah. Okay. We're also out of time.
Oh, that was fast.
So where can people find you, Brennan?
You can find me as Largely the Truth on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and on Letterboxd if you want to follow my nerdy movie journey. And of course, you can find my podcast, The Ghost Story Guys, everywhere fine podcasts live, and as well as the retro horror fiction podcast that I co-write, Fear Daily, is also available in all those podcast places. And finally, you can find both my book, A Strange Little Place, and the books I've narrated, which are Ruth Roper Wild's These Haunted Times series, on Amazon.
And Saxon, where can people find you?
Mostly on Instagram under Super Inframan. I'm technically on Blue Sky and some other places too, but that's the only place I'm really active. In the Discord, of course.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, sir.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. Without you, this show would be hard to sustain. So thank you all. And a special shout out to the patrons pledging $10 or more. Greg Ross, Cherry Trapezoid, Tactical Therapist, John Blackburn, Matt in Delaware, Mark Smith, Madeline J., Marty Garza, Critter 80, Gantic, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Sean Cosgrove, Matthew Sproul, Ruth Fortescue, Andrew Nichols, Martha, Tyler Glimstead, Christine, Mothman Bren, Mark Brady, Patricia Gaia-Quinta, Kevin Schreck, Linz Jackson K, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Charles Davis, Kristen L, Giotto, Riker and Stark, Abby Allen, Bright Rectangle, Eric Citron, Kevin, American Rambler, Sam Sharon, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Eric Todd, Ann Witowski, Vincent Trewell, Will Powell, Barbara Fisher, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Jay, MTK, History and Coffee, Heather Wigton, Diane B., Beverly Williamson, Tom, Early Ritual, Jim and Sophie, Jonathan Frost, Victoria, John Bracken, Paul Jeffries, Janet's Planet, Ron Dupre, Laser Printer Jam, Perry Peters, Varosh K., MJ Armstrong, Jack Huntington, Lauren McLean, Stacy Sherwood, James Lindsay, Billuminati, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Mark Shoemaker, Ron Dupre, Will Cherry, Seed Person, The Ghost Story Guys, Liam Huddock, Harold, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Craig Sagastumi, Colin Karras, Matthew Brown, and Paul Guile Simpson. Thank you all so very, very much. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Of course, there is a Patreon segment to go along with it, and you can become a patron by going to wheredidtheroadgo.com and clicking on the big Patreon link. It's only $3 a month. That's very, very cheap, and it helps out the show a lot. All right, I do want to welcome some new patrons. Number 6, JFE 1138, and I want to thank Tom, Early Ritual, for upping his membership to the next level. I appreciate all of that. Thank you so much. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is brought to you in part by our Patreons. You can find more at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. Website designed by John Tudor. The intro for this show was reimagined by Andrew Ham, a.k.a. Lord Happus on Spotify. And the voice is Psyche Kamir of Psyche Corporation. Artwork for the show designed by Timothy Renner, Jeff Ritzman, and Nadim Mahibahi. General inquiries, comments, etc. can be directed to contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Thank you all for listening and for all the support. www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.